Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 4. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about Excel built-in functions, data types, and keyboards are fast. Now, here's our topics right here. And the very first thing we got to talk about is what does it mean if something is aligned to the left and to the right? That's going to be defined by what type of data type we have in the cell. And if we're trying to add numbers and we see some numbers aligned to the left, we know there's trouble. And we'll see how to get out of that trouble in this video. Then our next topic, we got to talk about built-in functions like count, COUNTA, sum, the max function, the min function, and the average function. And then we'll talk about how important keyboards are in Excel. And we'll see the most amazing keyboard of all, Control-Shift-Arrow. Now, before we get busy doing examples in Excel, we need to go to our class website. And I need to keep you on track in this class. We need to remind ourselves about what we did in video number 1. Now, we need to go to our class website. Here's the base, people.highline.edu/mgirvin website. We're in Business 135, so we click that. We're studying Introduction to Excel, so we click that. And guess what? Video 1, I showed you how to download the Excel file and PDF file and create a folder. Now, if you haven't created that folder and downloaded these files, you have to go back to video 1 and do that because files for every single video in this class need to be saved in one location so you can access them throughout the class. Now, I'm going to use the keyboard that we learned back in video number 1 to open up Windows Explorer. The keyboard is Window E. This is Windows Explorer. On the left, it shows you all your drives. I happen to be using a jump drive. If you are using a home computer and you always have access to the hard drive, then as we did in video 1, you created your folder on your hard drive. On the left, I'm going to come over and click the triangle for my jump drive, and there's our business math folder that we created in video number 1. And look at that. The naming convention for these files will always allow you to sort so that the files are in chronological order. There's an Excel file and PDF for video number 1. PDF and Excel file for video number 2, and so on. Now, these are important because later, if you need to go look up something in the PDF or the Excel file because you're taking a quiz or doing a test, that's what these files are. Not only that, but all of the PDF files together constitute a free book. Remember, this is a no textbook class here at Highline, so you don't have to go spend $200 or $300 on a textbook. The Excel files, videos, and PDF files together are all of the free content. Go back to our class website, and we want to download the Excel file. Right-click, Save Link As. Be sure on the left that you select whatever the drive is, and then the Business Math folder has to be selected before you go and click Save. Now let's download the PDF. Right-click, Save Link As. Now, because I already saved one time from that website, up in the Save As address bar, it has the folder path already listed. Now, my folder path is because I'm on my computer with my drive. Whatever your folder path is, make sure that Business Math is the last folder. Then I click Save. If I go back to Windows Explorer, now I can see all of the files listed. Be sure to download and save all the files because they will come in handy throughout our class. Now let's go back over to Excel, and we want to start on the sheet DT for data types. Now we want to talk about data types. That means whether something is text, a number, or something called a logical or Boolean value, which just means true or false. So if we're going to talk about data types, we also need to talk about the default alignment in Excel. Now, default alignment means I haven't used any of the alignment buttons here, like center, right. I haven't changed any of the styles. And actually, in a couple videos ahead, we'll have a video specifically about style formatting. But what we want to see is what will happen if I type a number in this cell, and then what will happen if I type text or a word, because those are the main two data types that we're going to be dealing with in this class. So let's just type a number, 10.23. Now when I hit enter, we can see the default alignment for numbers is to the right. Now that will always be the case if Excel thinks it's a number. Now let's come down here and let's just type a word. We're going to be dealing with lots of people's names like employee names or sales rep names. So we're going to type Abdi Smith. And when I hit enter, look at that. Text is always going to be aligned by default to the left. Now anytime you type and you get your default alignment, that's a visual cue to you. Excel thinks this is a number. Excel thinks this is text. That matters because later when we're adding numbers or doing calculations, if a number is not a number in Excel, your formula will not work. Now let's just see what happens if we mistype a number. So I'm going to type 10 point, and I'm accidentally going to type a space, which happens sometimes because we're human and we make typing errors. But now I'm going to type 23 and enter. Immediately, the visual cue that Excel did not understand that this is a number is that it is aligned to the left. Excel thinks it's text. That extra space matters. Now, it's easy to fix. So if we have to enter numbers for our formulas and you make a typing error and you see it aligned to the left, you have to go look at it and figure out what's wrong. Well, this one is easy. We have an extra space. So when I backspace and hit enter, no problem. Now I can use that number in a formula. Now I'm actually going to put this in edit mode, and I actually double click, not F2. F2 always puts the cursor at the very end, which is handy for formulas. But right here, I tried to double click just so I could get my cursor in the right location. And now I'm going to type a space and enter. I want to leave that there just so we remember that that can happen. That is considered text, even though it's really just an incorrect number. Now, two other things we're going to be dealing with a lot in this class, dates. So I'm going to type today's date, 1/2/2018. Now when I hit enter, notice the visual cue is this is a number. It's aligned to the right. Now we'll be using lots of dates. The chapters for invoicing and payroll and chapters on loans that we issue will all be dealing with dates. Now here's what happens if you type an incorrect date. And there's lots of ways to type incorrect dates. I'm going to type 1/2/2000, and I'm accidentally going to type 2 8s. When I hit enter, there's your visual cue. Excel does not think that that is a proper date number. Now you can see what I did. I accidentally typed an 8. So I'm going to do the same thing, double click to get to that 8, backspace, and when I hit enter, now it's fixed. Now I want to Control-Z and leave that there as an incorrect date. Another thing we'll be dealing with in this class is time. When we get to payroll, we're going to have to enter in the time the employee came in and the time they left out, and then figure out how many hours they worked. Now, time is always hours, minutes, seconds. We're just going to type 8 hours, and a colon is what helps Excel figure out that you mean time here. Now I'm going to type 00 because the person came in, say, at 8 a.m., space, and then a.m. You type p.m., Excel will know it's p.m. a.m., it knows it's a.m. When I hit enter, there's our visual cue. To the right, Excel thinks this is a proper time number. Now, an incorrect time means we didn't enter it correctly. For example, we could just type 8 a.m. We forgot the colon and the zeros, for example. When I hit enter, there's our visual cue. Excel thinks that that is text. Another example is we'll have lots of product codes for invoicing and sales transactions. So a product code could be something like this. So far, it sort of looks like a number. As soon as we type that dash and something like GH, that is no longer a number. It is alphanumeric, JYT. And when I hit enter, it's properly aligned to the left. Now, there's something else we'll have to deal with, but not so often in this class. If you type the letters TRUE, when I hit enter, something happens. That is neither text nor a number. It is considered a logical value or a true-false value. Sometimes people call these Boolean values. True and false will always be centered and capitalized. If I type false and enter, always centered and capitalized. We will use examples of trues and false, like did an employee get a bonus, true or false. Now, the only other data type that's not really a data type, but sometimes we're going to have to deal with empty cells. And that just means it's an empty cell. Most of the time, we're going to be dealing with numbers, dates, times, and text values, either proper text values that we need for our business calculation or mistyped numbers, dates, or times. Now, one more thing about alignment. What you don't want to do in Excel, if we're going to use these numbers in formulas, you do not want to come up to alignment and do something like center. Because as soon as you do that, you lose your visual cue. If you need to track down an error, like a number that is actually considered text, you lose your visual cue when you use alignment. Now, lots of times people do alignment, but that's only on the very, very final report when you're going to print. If these numbers are going to be used in formulas, don't use the alignment. Now I'm going to Control Z. All right, now let's go over to the sheet A1. And we want to talk about functions like count, COUNTA, sum, max, min, and average. Now, we need to talk about a certain type of calculation, because this class is a business math class, and we'll be doing lots of calculations. But an aggregate calculation is any time we take many items and use them to calculate a single answer. Now, we've all done aggregate calculations. We're just learning the name for this type of calculation. We all have taken a bunch of numbers and added them. When we take all the individual numbers and add them to get a single total, that's an example of an aggregate calculation. We also might count how many items. Notice lots of items, but when we count them, we're getting a single answer. That's an example of an aggregate calculation. Now, luckily, we're not going to have to count manually or by hand or add each individual calculation. In Excel, there's a bunch of built-in functions. And in this video, we're going to see count, COUNTA, sum, max, min, and average. These are all aggregate functions that will do, for example, count function counts numbers. COUNTA counts cells that are not empty. Sum function adds numbers. Max finds the biggest number. Min finds the smallest number. And average will add up all the numbers and divide by the count. Each one of the built-in functions in Excel is pre-programmed to do a specific task. Now, let's go ahead and start off by looking at the count function. I'm going to select cell F10. Now, all formulas start with an equal sign as the first character in the cell. Now, so far in the class, we've made formulas where we selected cell references and did math operators like multiplying and dividing. But guess what? We can type the name of a function. For example, if I type COU, wow, look at that. This is our function drop-down list sorted alphabetically. Now, notice it's highlighted in blue, the very first one, but I can use my down arrow to select each one of the functions. Now, notice if I up arrow, COUNTA, it will always show you a screen tip that describes what that function does. For example, this one says counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Up arrow counts the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. Now, this is an important screen tip because if you're having trouble figuring out which function does what, you just read the function screen tip. Now, this one you probably don't need help with. This one, count blank, well, they should have said count empty cells because that's what it does. Now, that's a weird function, But imagine you had a column where someone entered data. You could use the count blank to see how many entries that person missed. It will count the empty cells. Now I'm going to up arrow because count numbers is exactly what we want. Now whichever function is highlighted in blue, once you see the one you want, you use the tab key to enter it into the formula. Now we have an equal sign that starts all formulas, built-in function count, and all of our built-in functions will start with an open parentheses. There'll always be a screen tip, and inside the screen tip is the name of the function, and inside the parentheses are what are called arguments. Now for aggregate functions like count, COUNTA, sum, there are multiple arguments that allow you to enter multiple ranges or cells. Later in the class, we'll see non-aggregate functions like round and VLOOKUP, which will do other things besides aggregate calculations. But for our screen tip value 1, that means please highlight the range. I'm going to go ahead and select with my mouse and click and drag. Now remember, this is in full edit mode. If you make a mistake, even if I accidentally click over here, no problem. As long as the dancing ants are going, you can reselect them when you have the correct range. And for us, it's D2 to D18. So count. We'll look through that range of cells and count how many numbers there are. Now we need to close parentheses, and I'm going to use Control-Enter to put the formula in the cell. I can see the answer is 15. That means it counted 15 numbers. Of course, as we just talked about a second ago, those are not numbers. Now we can look up into the formula bar, equal sign, built-in function, count, range. Now we'll come back and fix these numbers later, but let's look at our next function. I'm going to click in the cell G10, COUNTA, counts not empty cells. And guess what? That will work to count all of the items that have been entered, regardless of whether they've been entered as numbers or text. I'm going to type equals count, and when I see my function highlighted in blue, I hit tab. Notice it says value 1, value 2. I can simply highlight, and for our first examples on this sheet, we're only going to use value 1. Again, if you had multiple ranges in different parts of your spreadsheet, you just highlight separate ranges. We'll see that example in a little bit. Now I'm going to close parentheses. Control-Enter. There's our count of 17. It picked out everything, numbers and text. I can see the formula up in the formula bar. Now the sum function, this is perhaps the #1 most used function in Excel. And because it is so popular, yes, this one function out of the 450 possible functions in Excel, sum function is the only function to have a keyboard shortcut. Now we could type it out equals sum, open parentheses, or we could even use the button up in a couple of different places in the ribbon tab. But we're never going to do it. Since sum function is used so often, and in this class we'll use it hundreds of times, we're always going to use the keyboard to get the sum function. So you ready? The keyboard is Alt equals. Now as soon as you Alt equals, it puts in the equal sign, the sum function, that's the built-in function, the 2 parentheses, and it will always try to guess the correct range. Now it's polite. It hunted everywhere for numbers and thought we wanted to add these. But that's not what we want. But no problem. The dancing ants are dancing, so we simply highlight and redirect to get the correct range, D2 to D18. Control-Enter. There is our total. It added only the numbers. The sum function is programmed to add numbers. It did not add these. Again, later we'll fix these and we'll see that everything will update. Now let's try our next function, the max. Perhaps we want to find the biggest sale of all the sales numbers. So equals max tab. This screen tip says #1, #2. Actually, if we looked at the sum function, the max function, the min, and average, they all have #1 because these functions work on numbers. That's the name of the argument in this screen tip. No problem. We're simply going to highlight our sales column. Now let's learn a great trick. if you have a simple aggregate function, that close parentheses is not necessary. If I leave it off and Control Enter, Excel will put it in for us. In fact, you look up into the formula bar, and sure enough, it put that parentheses in. So max function, no problem. It doesn't matter how many numbers or in what order they're sorted. It will always find the biggest number. If we looked through manually with our eyeballs, we could see, sure enough, that matches. We could do the same, but find the minimum value using the min function. I'm going to use tab. Number 1, I simply highlight the range. Now watch this. I'm going to not only not put the closed parentheses in, but instead of using Control Enter to put the formula in the cell and keep the cell selected, or Enter to move the cursor down, I'm going to hit the Tab key because my goal is to put the formula in the cell and move over to the cell to the right to create my next formula. So I'm going to hit Tab. And sure enough, it found 414.12 as the smallest number in that column. All right, the average. Oh, wait a second. Average, what is that? We add them all up and divide by the count. No problem. We could do it longhand since we already have the sum and the count. But forget that. If you didn't have the sum and the count, we can use the average function. I type AVER. I notice there's a bunch of different types of average functions, but I'm reading the screen tip. Returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments. That's exactly what we want. Average, we all learned this in arithmetic many years ago. But number 1, I simply highlight. No longer do I need to add them all up and divide by the count. I simply use the average function. And now when I hit Enter, it totally calculates the average from all of the sales. So the average sales from this data set, $315.88. Now, we actually could do it longhand because we have the sum and the count of all those numbers. So down here in cell H18, equal sign, I'm going to click on the cell with the sum, divided by / and click on the cell with the count. When I hit Enter, I get exactly the same number. Now, we had some data entry errors over here, and we have our visual cue. Now, we actually didn't use dates in any of our calculation, but we did use these two numbers here. So I'm going to edit them and fix them so they're actual numbers. And then our count formula, which is counting numbers, sum function, average, min, and max won't be affected, but all of those depend on the fact that these are numbers. So I'm going to click in the cell F2 to put the cell in edit mode and put the cursor at the end, backspace to get rid of that period, and Enter. We immediately see the visual cue to the right. We can see the count, the sum, and the average all updated. Now this one right here, I'm going to double click to put my cursor right in the middle and backspace to get rid of that space. When I hit Enter, a line to the right. Now it's a number. Our count, sum, and average functions all adjust. Now these over here, we didn't use these dates for any calculations. Now there's not 13 months in the year. Actually, the setting for date depends on your control panel on your computer. Sometimes, like in Europe, that would mean 13 days first month. But in our system, that really should be a 1. So when I delete that 3 and hit Enter, now it's a proper date. This looks like there was 2 extra 8s, so I'm going to put it in edit mode, backspace, and Enter. All right, so we saw count, COUNTA, sum, max, min, and average functions. Those are all aggregate calculations. Now we want to go look at A2 because sometimes we want to make aggregate calculations like average, max, and min. But look at that. The numbers are not in a single column or not in a range right next to each other. Scores for class 1, 2, and 3, we definitely want to calculate the average. So I'm going to click in cell B15 equals AVER, and I'm typing the minimum number of characters till I see the average function highlighted in blue. I hit Tab. Now we can use number 1, 2, 3, or however many we want. We just have to make sure to separate the ranges by a comma. So I'm going to highlight the first column of scores. Watch this. Now when I type a comma, the next argument becomes bold. It's saying, hey, now put number 2 in. Now I'm going to click and drag. Now there's another way besides typing the comma. You can actually use your control key with your mouse. This works in almost any computer system, whether it's in Word, PowerPoint, Excel. If I hold control, notice one thing is already selected. Here in Excel, it's a range. When I now highlight a separate range, because I'm holding control, I can see it entered in that range. If you were doing it in Word, it would just highlight the two things even though they're not next to each other. Now close parentheses, and when I hit Enter, there's the average for all three classes, 76.6. Actually, I meant to hit Control-Enter. I can see that range up in the formula bar. Now watch this. I'm going to totally cheat. I'm going to, with the cell selected, hit F2. Very carefully with my I-beam cursor, I'm going to click and drag because I don't want to have to enter those three ranges in again. So I'm going to use the keyboard Control-C to copy. Enter. Now I'm going to type equals MAX, tab. Control-V to paste. And there, instantly, it's got all three ranges. Enter. Equals MIN, tab. Control-V. Now, actually, we have one more topic in this video, and the topic is keyboards. As you've already noticed in this class, I'm already teaching you lots of keyboards. I will always try to teach you the most efficient way to do something. So if keyboards are faster, I'll try and teach you that method. Certainly Control-C, Control-V, those work in any system. Copy is C. Wait a second. V was paste. How come Control-P is not paste? Because that's print. All right, I'm going to enter. And there's the minimum from all three classes. All right, let's go over to our next sheet. KAF, for keyboards are fast. Yes, the question is why use keyboards over mouse and ribbon tab buttons? Most of the time, they're faster. Now, we have two examples here. We have one data set, and our goal is to do a little bit of formatting and add all the sales from this column. Then we have a second data set with a slightly different structure, but our goal is the same. We still need to add up all the sales. And both of these examples will help illustrate the power of keyboard shortcuts. Now, the first question is, how big or tall is this data set? If I scroll down, it would take me a long time to jump to the bottom. So there's a great keyboard that will automatically jump to the last bit of data in this column. This keyboard will keep going down until it bumps into the first empty cell, and then it will stop. So you ready? This keyboard is Control down arrow. I absolutely love that keyboard. I didn't have to waste time. I just immediately jumped to the last cell. Notice it's programmed to always stop when it sees an empty cell. If there was an empty cell inside the data set, it would have stopped. Now let's learn another keyboard. This keyboard sends us to cell A1. It is Control Home. That keyboard is awesome because sometimes you're way down off to the side somewhere and you just need to jump back to cell A1. Now, here's another great keyboard that's similar to the keyboard we just did. Control down arrow jumps. But if my goal is to highlight the whole column, either to format with currency, which is what we're going to do, or up here we'll actually have to highlight the whole range to add inside the sum function, we can use Control-Shift down arrow. So let's try it. I'm clicking in the top cell. Control-Shift down arrow. That is awesome. It highlights. By adding Shift to our Control and arrow, we highlight the whole range. Now I can go up to the number group in the Home Ribbon tab, click the drop down, and let's choose currency. That is beautiful. Now let's try that same keyboard inside the sum function. Well, watch this. Alt equals is the keyboard for the sum function. It didn't guess at a range because there are no numbers directly around it. But no problem. I click in the top cell, and now let's use Control-Shift down arrow. Just like that, it highlights all the way to the bottom. Now, another great keyboard is, notice we're down somewhere at the bottom of this spreadsheet, and I want to jump back to the active cell. That means where is my cursor? Well, the keyboard to jump back to the active cell is Control Backspace. Look at that. We did Alt equals Control Shift down arrow and Control Backspace. Those keyboards save a lot of time. Now I'm simply going to hit Enter. Now, extending on the Control arrow keyboard, let's try all 4 arrows. I'm going to do Control down arrow. Notice it jumps down to the last bit of data before an empty cell. If I do Control right arrow, it does the same thing. Control up arrow, same thing. It sees an empty cell, so it stops. Control left arrow. Now next, notice I would like to highlight all these numbers, but I'm actually highlighting in 2 directions. So Control Shift down arrow would go all the way down. Control Shift right arrow would do it this way. Well, we can use those 2 keyboards in succession. All I'm going to do is hold Control Shift and then right arrow, down arrow. So those 2 arrow keys after Control Shift highlighted a rectangular range. Now I'm going to add drop down currency number format. Oh, look at that. The pound sign means the column is not wide enough. So I'm going to actually increase all the column widths simultaneously to the same width. I'm going to click on F and then click and drag all the way to L. And then I'm going to click and drag between F and G, and that will automatically fit all the columns to the same width. Another keyboard we want to learn is how to highlight the current table, or what is called the current region. Current table or current region, all it means is please highlight the current table with a border of empty cells all the way around. Now, I could use Control Shift arrow arrow, but there's a much faster keyboard. It's either Control Shift 8, or if you have a number pad with asterisks, use Control asterisk on the number pad. That is awesome. It doesn't matter how big, tall, or number of columns, it will instantly highlight everything. Now let's add all borders. Click in all borders. Now I'm going to highlight the cell C4 to C5, Control C, right arrow, and Control V to paste. Now I'm going to click in the cell D4, F2, which puts the cell in edit mode and puts the cursor at the end, backspace, and I'm going to type a 2. So this will be total year sales, data set 2. Enter. Now, please use the delete key, not right-click delete. If you use right-click delete, it actually shifts cells, and sometimes that'll wreck your spreadsheet. So if you want to delete the content, use the delete key on the number pad. So you ready? Now we need to add from this data set. Alt equals, it totally guessed wrong, but no problem. Click in just the first number for Toyota, and we're going to use Control Shift right arrow, down arrow. It got them all. I love that. It's so fast. Control backspace to jump back to the active cell and enter. Notice both of these data sets have exactly the same number. They're just in slightly different forms. All right, that was a lot of fun with keyboard shortcuts. We'll use keyboards throughout the entire class. Why? Because they're fast. Back on A2, we saw that we can use aggregate functions on multiple ranges. On AF1, we learned about the COUNTA, sum, max, min, and average aggregate functions to make calculations from a data set. We also saw how to fix our numbers when Excel thought they were text. And we started off by defining data types. Mostly in this class, we'll be dealing with text and numbers. And the big drawback is this. When you see your numbers aligned to the left, you know there is trouble. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including video number 5 coming up next, which will be all about number formatting. All right, we'll see you next video.